and welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children, the podcast where I share with you the recordings of the bedtime stories I've told my children in the past. I'm Dan Winella, your host and storyteller, and tonight is the fifth night of our pre-Christmas bedtime story marathon. And tonight takes a more Christmassy turn. Winella no sooner returns from solving the math fairy's problems in integer when she receives a new request from help. A request from a certain very jolly someone. I hope you enjoy the story. Winella woke up and opened her eyes. It was still fairly early morning, and she could tell from so much light coming in the window that it must have snowed during the night, because it seemed very bright outside for so early morning. Winella was waking up early a lot these days. She was getting excited because Christmas was coming. She thought that perhaps this would be the year when she would manage to stay awake and to see Santa Claus when he came in to give her presents. She had tried every year since she had been 3 years old to try.
How old was Winella today?
Oh,
16?
No, Winella's not 16. I think Winella's probably about, I don't really know for sure. I think she's about 8.
Between both of our age.
Yeah, she's about 8, probably.
Yeah.
7, 8, somewhere right around there.
Yeah, somewhat.
But she had tried every year to stay awake and see Santa putting the presents under the tree and meet him. But every year she sat up on New Year's Eve, and when she woke up in the morning, the presents were all there, and she never managed to stay awake all night. But she had plans. This year, she was going to try to get some of her mommy's coffee and drink it to help her stay awake, because she had heard that sometimes her mommy drank coffee to stay awake when she was sleepy. Well, as Winella was lying in bed listening, thinking all these thoughts, she heard a noise. The noise was a gentle tink, tink at her window. She sat up and she looked outside the window, and her mouth just dropped open because there was an elf at her window.
Elf?
Yes, an elf. Now, Winella was surprised by a couple of things. First of all, she had never seen many elves. She had seen a lot of things in her life, but she had not seen many elves at all. And the second thing was that Winella's window was on the second story, and the elf was looking in her window, and she was wondering, what was he standing on? So she crossed to the window and looked out, and the elf was standing on a sleigh. The sleigh wasn't standing on anything at all. It was floating in midair. And as she craned her neck to look to one side, there on the front of the sleigh were hitched up 2 reindeer. They were also not standing on anything. She thought, this must be Santa's sleigh. She opened the window a little bit and said, "Yes? May I help you?" And the elf said, "Yes, ma'am. My name's Wimbledon, and I'm one of Santa's helpers."
Wait, Wimbledon? The one in charge?
He's the one in charge of Santa's sleigh, yep. My name's Wimbledon. I'm one of Santa's helpers. And we're having a little problem at the North Pole, you see. And he asked me to go find someone named Winella that he said was on his nice list and had apparently helped some fairies recently. Winella said, "Oh, well, I'm Winella." And Wimbledon said, "Oh, good. Are you available for a little trip to the North Pole?" Winella said, You mean I get to go meet Santa?" Wimbledon said, "Well, he has asked if you would come." Winella said, "Hold on. I've got to go tell my mommy and put my adventuring clothes on. Do you need anything while you wait?" Wimbledon said, "No, we're fine." Winella said, "It'll be about 15 minutes, okay?" Wimbledon said, "That's fine. I'll be right here." So Winella, she closed the curtains first, and then she changed into her adventuring clothes, and she went downstairs. She told her mommy, who was still just waking up, but who had come down to the kitchen. She told her, and her mommy said, "Well, good, have a good time." And she got Winella a little quick breakfast of some granola and some yogurt and some milk. and an orange to take with her. Then Winella dashed back up to her room. She opened the window and she stepped out into the sleigh. She sat down and Wimbledon covered her up with a big, furry polar bear fur blanket. And she snuggled down underneath it. She wasn't really very cold yet, but Wimbledon told her that she would be, because they were going to go very fast, and they were going very, very far north. They were going so far north until you couldn't go any farther. So, Winella snuggled down under the polar bear fur as they flew along, and she was really very surprised how fast the reindeer ran. They flew much faster than Joey had ever flown. She almost felt like she was moving along a cat's paw highway in the air. She said, "So, Wimbledon, what is it Santa wants to see me about?" Wimbledon said, "I think I'd better let him tell you himself." Winella said, "Okay." And because she had woken up very early, and because she was fairly tired, she closed her eyes and snuggled down under the polar bear fur, and found herself very drowsy and drifting off to sleep. She opened her eyes with a snap when the sled landed with a bump, and then she could hear the runners of the sleigh running along the ice and snow with sort of crystalline crunching sound. And as she opened her eyes, she saw that they were approaching a cluster of buildings she knew could only be Santa's workshops. Many of the buildings were painted red, and the ones that weren't were painted blue or yellow. There were light posts that were striped like candy canes. And she could see a barn where there were a number of reindeer coming and going. As soon as Wimbledon stopped the sled, he said, "Come on, the reindeer will take care of putting the sleigh away." And he took her in to a warm room that had a big desk, and a man with a big white beard was sitting behind it. And Winella thought, "Is it? Could it be?" And then the man looked up, and he smiled, and he said, "Ho, ho, 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 ho." He said, "This must be Winella. Winella, you're very near the top of my nice list this year. You've done such a good job helping so many people. And I am so hoping that you can help me too." Winella said, "Well, how can I help you, Santa Claus?" He said, "I have a problem. This is my problem. I have a chief elf for designing of new toys. Her name was Trinketa. But I'm afraid that Trinketa's had a problem. Her sister has been in an accident, and she has to go home to help her care for her until she gets better. The only problem is, that leaves me with no one to design new toys. I can't very well give the same toys I gave last year, can I now? Ho, 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 ho." Winella said, "Well, I guess you could, but couldn't you just sort of rotate them?" "No, ho, 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 ho. No, we need someone to design new toys. Someone who's creative and a little crazy and who likes to do fun and silly things. And I thought of you, Winella. I need you to come and move up here to the North Pole to live with me until Christmas. And then I need you to live here with me for 2 days out of every week to design new toys for next year. Ho, 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 ho." Winella said, "Wow, designing toys for Santa Claus." He said, "Let me show you the workshop." And he took her in, and he showed her the workshop where some of the other toy designers were working. And Winella saw how it worked, that all a toy designer had to do is think up a toy and draw a little sketch of it, and the elves would get right to work making the toy from a sketch into a reality. It seemed like the elves were making everything you could imagine. They were making toy dolls and toy cars, toy boats, toy planes. They were making video games. They were making candy. They were making balls and bicycles and just anything you could imagine. Winella thought, wow, this would be the best job ever. Anything you can imagine, no matter how silly or crazy, they can make it into a toy. Santa took her back to the office and said, "Now, Winella, can I talk you into the job?" "Oh, oh, oh, oh." Winella said, "Santa, we need to talk. And she sat down in front of his desk. She said, Santa, I would love this job, but you know what? I'm a little girl, and I live with my mommy and daddy. I wouldn't want to come live at the North Pole. Oh, that's not a problem. We can just move your mommy and daddy up here. And Winella said, well, yes, but there's my brother and all my friends at my own house, and I have to go to school. I couldn't come up here 2 days per week for the rest of the year. I have to go to school, Santa Claus. Ho. Well, this is indeed a problem, Winella. I need a toy designer. Someone with a wild imagination. I was hoping for you. I guess I'll have to think of someone else. Winella looked down at her feet. She felt bad for disappointing Santa. She stuck her hands in the pockets of her adventuring outfit. And when she stuck her hands in the pockets, her fingers touched something that was in one of her pockets. It was small and hard, and she pulled it out, wondering what it was. She looked at it for a moment. It was a gem. A gem that Strychnine had given her. The crazy, imaginative, wild Strychnine. An idea came to her. An idea so crazy it took her breath away, and she couldn't say anything for a moment. And then she said, Santa? Oh, what is it, Winella? She said, Santa, I have an idea. Let me tell you about what I did for the math fairies. And she told him the whole story about how she'd met Strychnine and how she'd promised Strychnine that she would find a place where she would be happy. And she told him all about Strychnine and all the things she had done with the proof, about how she had made castle walls crazy and how she had played with mud, and about how all she wanted to do was have a good time. And Winella said, you know, that made her a really bad person to have all the power and the proof, and it made her not the right person to be an integer. But you know, Santa? And Santa said, you know, Strychnine was on my naughty list this year. I just don't know if I want a naughty fairy here. But I think you might be on to something, Winella. You know what? We'll give her a try. There's only 4 days to Christmas. We'll see what she can come up with in the next 4 days, and if she does a good job, I'll keep her on for next year. Now we just need a way to bring her here. Winella said, that I can do for you, Santa Claus. And she held the gem in her fist, and as tightly as she could, and she thought of Strychnine. And a moment later, poof, the fairy was standing there. You called, Winella? My goodness, where are we? Strychnine, you've been a very naughty fairy this year. Oh my goodness, Strychnine said. Santa, I haven't tried to be naughty. I just like to have fun. You know what, Strychnine? I think, and your friend Winella here thinks that maybe we've found a place for you to have fun. And then Santa gave another tour of the workshop. And after he'd given it, they came back in, and Strychnine's eyes were really big. And Santa said, so, Strychnine, what do you think? Would you like to be my new lead toy designer for this Christmas? And Strychnine said, that looks like a blast, Santa Claus. And Santa said, now we do have some rules around here. You design the things you want to design, but you don't mess with other people's designs. You do your work. And Strychnine said, that's okay. My work looks like fun. I don't need to mess with anybody else's work. I can design anything, Santa. And Santa said, that's right. And if you do a good job, we'll keep you on till next year. And Strychnine gave a big smile, and she gave Santa a hug, and she gave Winella a hug, and when she hugged Winella, she said, thank you so much. And Winella hugged her back, and she said, you're welcome. And then it was time for Winella to go home. Strychnine got right to work designing new toys, and Winella took another nap in the sleigh on the way home.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's story, but questions and witty commentary were supplied by my children. The music was created by Brandon Thompson. Your reviews and personal recommendations are the main way that new listeners find the show, so thank you for spreading the word. I'd love to hear your feedback, so feel free to get in touch via email or social media, which are listed in the show notes. Until next time, I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.